Hello, everyone. Welcome to Creativity-Hive's weekly show. My name is Miriam Haugen. I'm part of the Creativity-Hive team. We help budding videographers and anyone in the motion media business to up-level their skills particularly in post-production using Premiere Pro and After Effects. And I have a little message from our sponsor. Today's Creativity Hive episode is brought to you by iNet Media. iNet Media brings visual creativity to your video projects to tell your story and get noticed. inet-media.co.za. Awesome. And today we have Dr. Gideon, and I'm tell me how you pronounce your last name because I'm afraid I'm going to slaughter it.
No worries. It's For-mukwai. For-mukwai.
Very easy. For-mukwai. That's
Perfect.
not hard.
Yes.
And so I love the fact that you are a story warrior. But what does a story warrior do exactly?
That's a great question, Mariam. Thank you so much. A story warrior, in my understanding, is someone who fights business fires, but without firing a single shot. He or she fights business fires with the use of narrative tools, with the use of narrative strategies and narrative techniques that all are aimed at winning the heart and winning the mind. No shots fired. Win the heart, win the mind with simple words, experiences, events, because events and experiences help us to make sense of the world through another person's perspective.
Awesome. So you're primarily, I'm going to bring Neil on here too. Hi,
Please.
Neil.
Yeah, that explanation was really, really good. I mean,
Thank you, sir.
that was well said.
Thank you.
So are you working mostly with people in the corporate world?
I used to work predominantly with people in the corporate world. However, when I moved from Singapore to US, I retooled and I've refocused my business now on the smaller guy, the smaller entrepreneur, the mom and pop shop. And yes, if the big business come, I don't turn them away, but I predominantly work with the guys who make their own decisions about how they're going to put food on their table without going through a board of directors, a board of that, a bureaucracy. I don't want to deal with those ones too often. So I'm going out there and meeting people, everyday people who are business owners, coaches, consultants, videographers, teachers, educators, people that they have a message and they don't have the patience for all the BS. They want to sit around waiting for somebody to make decision for them. They want to make the decision, hit the ground running, take it to the consumer, and let the consumer decide whether the product is right or not.
I so That resonates with me. I'll tell you, the idea
Thank
of having to go through a board of directors or a bunch of bureaucrats to
you.
to get something done would drive me nuts.
Yeah.
Well, I have a lot of connections within Adobe, and people think that Adobe is like the product teams, and those product teams are a very small part of a behemoth, and they
Mhm.
are way down underneath layers of company up above them. And
Mhm.
so the people in charge of the various programs within Adobe don't have the authority to on their own make changes in those programs. The
Wow.
layers of marketing and experience people, M&E, have to
Mhm.
approve and sign off on things,
Wow.
uh, and it goes up through that to finally get up to their CEOs,
Mhm.
who clearly they'll make statements about how they're working to empower the individual creative.
Mhm.
uh, these are not people that have ever worked with an individual creative in their life. They have no clue what an individual creative does. They work with massive teams. They're used to an individual as someone like in a company with 500 enterprise licenses for Adobe stuff, you know? And so, yeah, working within that structure is so very different from anything that Miriam and I have ever done. You know, it's
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
so how did you find your passion for story?
I have to say, I did not exactly find my passion for story. Maybe my passion for story found me.
Ah,
Here's why.
okay.
I grew up in an environment that is steeped in storytelling. I grew up in Cameroon in Central Africa. However, I did not participate in it willingly. I got into storytelling very unwillingly, and I always dissed it off and said, "This is not something for me." I thought I was a scientist. I'm gonna go after social sciences. I'm doing those things that are considered as young boy, a young man to be very, very awesome that would earn me prestige. But while I was working in Asia, I started to teach firefighters, police officers, Navy officers in a classroom that is very highly air conditioned. And sooner than later, I noticed that some of them were going like this and like that. And they would wipe their
Right.
eyes and listen for a minute and then repeat the whole chain again. I thought, what can I do to drum things up? And unbeknownst to me, I started to infuse a few narrative stories here and there into my training plan. And wait a minute, I saw people doing this. They lean forward, they listen very closely. I was like, what's going on here? Why is it that they're listening now extensively? Nobody's dozing off. I had no idea. But when I tested a few times, I realized, oh, there's one correlation. It is the use of a narrative, a story, or something that is compelling. If I make it dramatic, they chewed on it even more. They loved it. So I started to use it more and more. So in a way, I did not necessarily go out there to say I'm going to invent this thing and use it. I tried it as a little toy, and it definitely took a life of its own. And then it took me along, and I said, all right, let's go on this ride. And since then, it's become a staple part of my business.
So that, yeah. So what, um, so you're working primarily with the written and the spoken word, right?
To a large extent, yes. I'm using the written word, the spoken word, because even on the programs that I coach and train, I always tell them that if you don't take the time to write it and write it really well, write it tight, write it neat, you will not be able to present it well. Your presentation, your delivery is a reflection of your writing. And so, yes, it's spoken word to a large extent because if you write the wrong word, you go and test it out, it's going to fall flat. But if you
Mm-hmm.
write the right word, you test it out, it's going to light a fire in the brain of the audience. And the audience is going to sit up and say, oh my goodness, this guy's brilliant. And they lean forward, they literally eating out of your hand. I don't know of any other art form that gives you that kind of privilege. So, yes, storytelling is to large extent spoken word, written word, without a doubt.
Right, right. Well, we are, of course, primarily visual storytellers. And
Mm,
so we're not always using words, but
mm,
but I think the principles are still the same. Um, we're using words, but it's in conjunction with images, with visual images too.
understand.
But um, okay, so what are some of the most common mistakes that you see people to engage an audience or tell a story?
Oh yeah, I believe there is lots of mistakes out there, but one that is very common is they start on a flat. They start on a beat that is unnoticeable. So it's one thing to try to match the pace or the energy level of the audience. But if you want to grab the attention, you gotta come with a you want to get something that grabs their attention, something that captures them. So most people go with a tone or start with something that's so cliche that everybody tunes out. So depending on the quality or the kind of story that you want to tell, it could either get people to tune out or to tune in. So what I do is I recognize the fact that the start and the end are very important. And if you look at what some psychologists say, you need to think about the primacy effect at the start and the recency effect at the end. I call it the bang and the boom. So start with a bang and with a boom. If you end with a whisper too, if it's not very congruent, if it's not very unique, it doesn't go a long way. So my point is you have to find some way to grab people's attention. People don't often do that. And there are a series of others. I don't know if you want to give me time to mention other mistakes. Because the second mistake I notice people make is that they announce the story. Let me tell you a story. That is boring. That is so old school. That's so kindergarten. Yes, if you're presenting, sharing a story to children in a middle school or below, tell them it's a story. For adults, don't do that. There are a myriad of factors you should not announce a story. Inform them. I have an experience. I have something that occurred to me recently. Let me share this with you. You jump right in and you tell a well prepared story. They will enjoy it. But when you announce it, they sort of put on some defenses that you are not very familiar with. And it has to do with the way our educational system has evolved over time from the great days of Socrates in Athens and so on, all the way to today. So do not announce a story. That's the second mistake that I'm seeing. A third mistake that I'm observing is the story has no stakes. There's nothing at stake. Why should I root for somebody who is not going up against a challenge? This guy's walking in the park. Good luck walking in the park. But if he's walking in the park, he's looking for the bad guy who has committed an offense and is hiding in the park. Now I want to know, is he going to get the bad guy? Or if he walks across a line and the line says, if you walk 3 more feet beyond this, your life will be in jeopardy. That it raises the stakes. If there are no stakes, it's not a story. It's not exciting. The human brain tunes out. Why does it tune out? The amygdala at the back, at the top of the stem, the brain stem, which is a part of the brain like two almond shape that controls what the brain should pay attention to and what the brain should not pay attention to. If you present a story without stakes, the amygdala tunes out because it has a very, 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 very micro attention span. It's designed for fight or flight. Fight or flight. Whenever there's no fight, there's no flight, amygdala doesn't care. If it's monotonous, it doesn't care. But if you bring something super, 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 super tiny, it's very unusual, amygdala pays attention. If it's huge, if it's big, if it's challenging, amygdala pays attention. Very often, some of our tellers too don't include elements like that. And I could go on and on, but I don't. I want to check with you. Do I have time?
Oh,
Most definitely. I'm sitting here enjoying this immensely,
so
learning.
how would you apply that? Okay, yeah, I've heard this before that you don't want to start a talk with, well, thank you for having me, and you get up in front of a crowd and thank you. I want to thank my mother and everybody for inviting me today, and I'm going to tell you a story. All of that is not necessary. Just jump right into a story.
Yes.
And if you watch TED Talks, that's what they usually do.
Yes. They're well trained, they're well coached. So, for
Mhm.
example, instead, and I know you're visual communicators, instead of saying, oh, thank you, Neil, thank you, Miriam, what an opportunity, this is amazing. I would just say, I will never forget the day that I crossed the Mississippi for the first time, for example. I will never forget the day I almost died while running a mini marathon. Why was I there in the first place? Why did I take to a journey that I wasn't prepared for? All right, come with me to a teeny tiny city in the hinterlands of Africa. That's where I ran my first marathon in 1990 on the eve of my high school graduation. Why was I there? Then I take you to the scene and I show you how I collapsed just about 3, 4, 5 feet away from the finish line. And
Right.
instead of them carrying me across the finish line, they carry me away from the finish line. What a travesty. What a tragedy. Who does that? Now, I took you to the scene in a very quick way. So if I'm a visual communicator, maybe I should start with that guy laying on the ground. Maybe in Cameroon at that time, there were no paramedics. So whoever brings a piece of paper, this is what they're just doing. They're just doing something like that. Hey, is he going to wake up? There's no medical person in sight. So my point being, start with an action that grabs their attention. So they see a guy who's struggling for his breath. And the normal thing is amygdala is fascinated by that. Is he going to make it? Is he about to die? Is fight or flight? Okay, what's going to be the next thing? So then from there, you can then say, all right, this guy had gone to run a race, but he was not prepared for it. And then you talk about the fact that he heard about it just 2, 3 days before. And then you take them on the whole journey of him jumping out of bed and saying, I'm gonna run. I think I can feel my heartbeat, I can run. No, not everybody who has a heartbeat can run a race. You have no business there. Let the people who are trained athletes run. You're about to lose your life. And end up, what's a big lesson for me? End that story too with a takeaway. What is a gift? Otherwise, you just wasted someone's time. So that's another mistake that I see people make. They don't end the story with a gift or with a special elixir. What is the essence of that telling?
Right. What was the point of the story?
Exactly.
What does
Exactly.
what relevance does it have to me?
Why
Right.
do I have to listen to it? I need to use it as something to make sense of the world. Your telling should be a metaphor for my own life. Like, okay, why did you watch that movie? I watched that movie because let me have a little essence of why you went to run that race.
Awesome. So if you're working with a mom and pop business, I don't know what's an example of a business that you maybe worked it with before,
Mhm.
and what are some stories that what kinds of stories should we be coming up with to sell our businesses?
So I do an exercise which I call excavation exercise, which the goal of that is to allow me to generate a number of stories that we can use. What I
Good.
precisely call a mission story, and I captured it in my second book, which actually became a bestseller on storytelling. I call it the science of storytelling. And when I do the excavation exercise, it takes us back through the first 15 years of our life, the second 15 years of our life, the third 15 years of our life, and so on and so forth. I call it the dependency phase, the takeoff phase, the full flight phase, and so on. So within each phase of our life, I'm looking at what are some of the defining events that happen? What are some of the things that shaped you up or down, positive or negative? And when I draw those incidents or those experiences, I look at which one is most fascinating. Which one is intriguing? Why is it intriguing? Because amygdala is also fascinated by things that don't have clear answers. Then I can use that in helping the mom and pop shop to craft a backstory that is congruent with why they're involved in this business. For example, why you and Mr. Haugen are involved in this business. If I were to do an excavation for you, I'll find a reason why you got started. How did you get started? And when we find that reason, we tie in an emotional metaphor between the past, the present, and the future. It would allow an audience to say, oh, they're absolutely doing this because it is the most meaningful work that they could ever do. They're not doing it just for the money. If they had to decide between two people to do a project, very often we would decide for the guy that is doing it because he's doing it for the right reasons. So, in other words, we're rooting for the character who is in pursuit of a good goal. We're not rooting for the character that's only in pursuit of a greedy goal, which is, I just want to make a ton of money. Nobody roots for that kind of character. A character that's in pursuit of a good goal is a kind of character that we want to root for. So I would try to excavate, write it, or coach them on writing it in such a way that when somebody listens to it, they say, "Oh, I see. This makes sense." No wonder you are the best person for this call. You're the best person for this duty. That's my approach. I don't know about what other people do.
I like it. I
Thank
like it. Rooting for the character. You know, that's of course it's almost trite. People say it all the time. People want to do business with people that they know, like, and trust.
There you go.
But this is just putting it in a little different way, that you're the character
Yep.
of your business. You're the the hero,
You're not, you're the protagonist of the story.
the
You're the
protagonist.
one that is going up against the Goliath.
Mm-hmm.
You're the David going up against the Goliath. But along the way, you're going to need help from a hero. That hero could be somebody else. It could be, in the case of David, it could be the fact that he was an anointed guy. So his guru or his special guy was a guy up there that protected him. So along the way, if you are the protagonist, you make your customer your hero. Why?
Right.
Because without your customer, you can't survive. So if you can succeed in weaving in the customer as the hero, because in the past, when nobody could believe in you, one of them saw something special in you and gave you the opportunity. It is the reason you're in business today, because you would not have been in business if nobody championed, if nobody took interest in your work. So, in essence, the hero is actually your customer.
Customer, absolutely. The hero, yeah. They are the hero of the story.
Mhm.
Awesome. So,
I'm typing down a lot of this, by the way. This is awesome stuff.
oh, good, good. Well, you should put some of it up on our in the comments, Neil.
Mhm.
But okay, so maybe you covered this kind of already in the mistakes, when you're talking about mistakes that people make. But okay, so do you have some tips that you would like 3 tips that you would give us for creating a compelling story?
Yes, thank you for asking that. Here I get a chance to show off a little bit of some of the work that I've done. It took some time, 3 years, when I was researching for the book. I was looking at every new research paper, document on neuroscience, on how the human brain works. And I started to pick up bits and pieces here and there that enabled me to build together a small compendium of the most important elements of a fascinating story. And along the way from neuroscience, I discovered that when you tell a story that has an element of novelty, something new, something fresh, something different, the human brain is fascinated by that. And again, it ties to the fact that the amygdala hates monotony. It doesn't like mundane, it likes unique. So novelty is a big part. If you're talking about a destination, all right, cool. If I were to spend your time talking about somewhere right in your neck of the woods and I don't inject some new elements into it, it's going to be so boring to you. You're going to tune out. But if I talk about a fascinating destination, which is in some way of interest to you or related to other places you've been to, now I'm getting your attention. And because we learn by association, we start to try to associate that place with other places that we are familiar with. And that becomes very juicy. Our brain starts to secrete a lot of it secretes the juices of enjoyment that says, "Oh man, I wish I could go there." Now, that there's a name for that. We're not going to go into the dopamines, into all of that part now. But the second piece that I believe is important is to also consider the fact that surprises are good in a story. If a story is on the same frame, on the same frequency from start to finish, it's boring. But every now and then, grab something. All right, maybe it's a prop, and this is a vuvuzela. Maybe the audience could not see that coming. It makes it for a fascinating surprise that keeps the energy going. Or you could do something like, so the audience like, okay, what is that? So around my table, I have a number of tools that when I'm working with, like I spend the whole morning working with some corporate executives, I will pull up one of these. Most of them are by design, they're not by accident. As long as it's congruent with the message or with what I'm trying to get, a surprise is a very powerful piece that we can also use. The last one that I want to mention is the element of, I think we could choose specificity, something very, very, very specific. It could be a color, it could be a smell,
Mm.
it could be something as tiny as a tweezer, a pair of tweezers. I don't know if you can see it well.
Mm-hmm.
Something so unique. If you mention that, as long as it's not overwhelming details in your story, it becomes unforgettable. I've been in a situation whereby people tell me, I remember the story you shared with us 4 years ago. I'm like, 4 years? I can't even remember what I ate for dinner yesterday. You remember what I said 4 years ago? This is insane. But again, it is because we take time to craft it. We do not leave it to chance. When you craft it and you imbue in it elements of specificity, you will be surprised how far, how long lasting that story can be. So there are a few other elements I discovered in the course of reading those neuroscience ones, but suffice to say, those are three that I wanted to leave with you. Maybe the other ones I'll share with you next time. Now, what I'm
Okay.
introducing there is intrigue. That's a fourth one. I call them the NISS factors. The intrigue is something that the human mind is fascinated by. And the person who first discovered that was a Russian psychology by name uh, Zeigarnik. I call it the Zeigarnik technique. We'll talk about that next time. So
All
what I'm
right.
doing
You're
there is,
leaving us. You're going to leave us with wanting more. That's
so
great.
hopefully when you bring me back next time, I get to talk about that. All right.
Okay. Do
No
you?
obligations, Mariam. You don't have to bring me back, but I'm just saying I'm using that method right here to
That's great.
demonstrate what I'm talking about.
Do you have a copy of your book there that you can show us?
Yes, ma'am, I do. This is the science of
Okay.
storytelling. I wrote it from 2015 to 2000, not 2012 to 2015. It got out in 2015 and it was a bestseller in three categories on Amazon.
All right. Is
And
it still available on Amazon?
still available on Amazon. If you
Awesome.
need an autograph copy, let me know. I'll be happy to get yours. Or if you have a prize customer, you want to do some surprise to them, I'm happy to get you
Awesome.
a couple of copies so that
Yeah.
you could, you promote my business. I could hopefully also talk about this program to others. Only if you're convenient. Anyway, it's convenient.
That would be incredible. I'd love to read your book. That
Thank
would
you, man.
be great. Uh, um, very, very cool. So, gosh, okay. So we're going to leave people, I think, with wanting more. I think that's good to have that.
Yeah.
Any final comments or from for the good of the order? Neil, do you have anything?
I'm just sitting here thinking that, wow, this has been an
Yeah.
incredibly interesting and useful discussion to be part of. Um, because it's things like, you're pointing out items of specificity, and you brought out that bullhorn to talk
Mhm.
into, um, which of course immediately reminded me of how the very first thing where I decided to try and video an event, I coming out of stills photography, I had the camera coverage down cold. I mean, my imagery for the whole thing was great, and I had what I thought was adequate sound coverage between the camera, and I had a couple mics that I set up on that I could have, set up remote that would catch things that the camera wasn't close to. But when I got back and tried to edit that together as a story, as a video, it didn't matter that I had beautiful imagery for the whole thing.
Mhm.
I didn't have near enough sound, nor good enough sound,
Mm.
so that anyone would want to sit through it.
Ouch.
And so you're pulling out that bullhorn. That took me back to that first job I tried to do, where I got back and realized this is a total embarrassing plant your face from 500 feet on a sidewalk fail.
Oh,
Uh, you know,
ouch.
yeah, that those things are important. But yeah, so you think of, like, say, video as a visual medium.
Hmm.
But that's one of the things I've talked with so many people over the last like 8 or 10 years is, in video, if you don't have sound, the video does not matter. So whether it's,
Absolutely true. No sound, no video.
yeah, whether it's
It's like
words,
a series of still pictures.
yeah, words, ambient noise, all of these things matter tremendously. And if you don't have it, the video doesn't matter.
You just put a
Absolutely
nice
true.
a nice music track on the background and let the visuals tell the story. That would be my motto.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
Well, thank you so much, Gideon, for being
Thank
with
you
us.
very much for your time, and thanks for inviting me to share a couple of ideas with you and your followers, your fans, your fanatics. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mhm.